The photograph was creased and faded, its edges worn soft from years of being touched. The woman held it out with trembling hands. Private Daniel Cooper took it without thinking. Standard procedure: collect prisoner belongings, record them, return them later. He glanced down and stopped cold. The photograph showed 4 people standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Summer of 1936. You could tell by the Olympic flags hanging behind them. The Berlin Olympics, Hitler's grand display to the world. 3 of the people were German, a man, a woman, and a young girl, smiling and neatly dressed, the kind of family photo countless visitors took that summer. But the 4th person made Daniel's blood slow to a crawl. An American soldier in a U.S. Army uniform, staff sergeant stripes clear on his sleeve, standing with his arm around the German man's shoulders, laughing as if they were brothers. Daniel stared at the face. He knew that face. He had grown up with it. That face had taught him how to throw a baseball when he was 7, had helped him with schoolwork, had joined the army in 1934 when jobs were scarce and the military promised steady pay. That face belonged to his brother, Thomas Cooper, who had been stationed in Germany from 1935 to 1938, who had come home in 1939 talking about how beautiful Berlin was, how friendly the people were, how he had made real friends there, who had been killed on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944 at 26 years old. Daniel's hands began to shake. The German woman watched him closely. Prisoner 4291 Margaret Kleen, 43 years old, Wehrmacht Auxiliary, captured near Munich 3 weeks ago. Transferred through Camp Ruston, Louisiana yesterday. She had carried this photograph since 1938, soon into the lining of her coat, protected through bombings, evacuations, the collapse of Germany, capture and ocean crossing, and now this moment in a processing room in Louisiana, where an American guard stared at her most treasured possession. "Where did you get this?" Daniel asked, but his voice came out wrong, too tight, too high. Margaret did not speak English, at least according to her file, but she understood his tone, the shock written across his face. She spoke a single word, carefully in English, a word she was not supposed to know. Thomas. Daniel looked up sharply. She pointed at the soldier in the photograph, then at Daniel, then back at the soldier. "Brother," she said. The accent was thick, but the word was clear. "Your brother?" "Yes." Daniel could not make sense of it. This German woman, this enemy prisoner, someone who had served the Wehrmacht, was holding a photograph of his dead brother, saying his name, asking if they were related. "How do you know?" Daniel's throat closed and he tried again. "How do you know Thomas?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She pointed to the German man in the photograph. Then to herself. "My father," she said quietly. Daniel looked down at the photograph again and really saw it. The German man had his arm around Thomas, but more than that, they stood the way close friends stand, relaxed and natural, real affection visible even in a faded image taken 9 years earlier. The German woman, younger then, maybe 14 or 15, stood between them, grinning at the camera, and the older woman, likely the mother, rested her hand on Thomas's shoulder, a protective, maternal gesture, the same way Daniel's own mother touched people she cared about. This was not a casual tourist picture. This was family. "Sergeant," Daniel called out, his voice breaking. "Sergeant Morrison, I need you here right now." Morrison appeared in the doorway. "What's the issue?" Cooper. Daniel held out the photograph with shaking hands. "Sir, you need to see this. Before we go any further, I need you to understand what this is. This isn't just a photograph. This is evidence. In history, we talk about primary sources, objects and documents created at the time, not memories written years later, but real physical proof from the moment itself. This photograph is a primary source taken in Berlin in the summer of 1936. It shows an American soldier and a German family during the Olympics. But more than that, it shows something historians struggle to capture: friendship across borders, human connection between people who would soon become enemies, a moment of shared humanity before war destroyed it. Right now, you are about to see what happens when that evidence resurfaces, when a photograph taken in peacetime appears in a prison camp 9 years later, when the past crashes into the present in a way no one could have predicted. What follows will show you something textbooks rarely explain, not battles or generals or political orders, but the invisible threads that once linked Americans and Germans before the war. Families who tried to hold on to those ties even after their nations became enemies. People trapped between loyalty and love. Daniel Cooper is about to learn that his brother had a second family, a German family he cared about enough to stay connected with for 3 years. Margaret Klein is about to explain why she carried this photograph through destruction and defeat, why she protected it when she could have destroyed it, why it mattered more than her own safety. And you are about to understand why some photographs are worth more than any official report, why a single image can tell a story interrogation files never could. Stay with me, because this becomes complicated and beautiful and painful, and by the end, you will see World War II differently than before. Sergeant Morrison studied the photograph under the harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation room. Daniel stood stiffly, though every part of him wanted to sit before his legs failed. Margaret sat across the table, hands folded, waiting. "Cooper," Morrison said slowly, "is this your brother?" "Yes, sir." "Staff Sergeant Thomas Cooper, killed in action in Normandy, June 6, 1944. "And you're certain, sir, I'd recognize him anywhere?" Morrison turned to Margaret. Through the translator, a German-American woman named Helen Schmidt, he asked the obvious question. "How did you come to have this photograph?" Margaret replied in German, and Helen translated. "That is my father, Kurt Klein. The woman is my mother, Hella. The girl is me. We met Sergeant Cooper in Berlin during the Olympics." "How did you meet an American soldier?" "My father worked for the Olympic Organizing Committee, transportation coordination. He arranged movement for athletes and officials. Sergeant Cooper was part of the American military delegation, security for the U.S. Olympic team." Morrison wrote notes and asked, "And you became friends, more than friends?" The words lingered in the room. Helen translated carefully to make sure the meaning was clear. "More than friends, not romantic, something deeper." "Explain," Morrison said. Margaret took a breath and began. "The Berlin Olympics of 1936 were Hitler's greatest propaganda effort. Germany spent more than 40 million marks to present an image of strength and order. What most people don't realize is that the Olympics required cooperation with the outside world. Thousands of foreign visitors needed housing, transport, and security. The regime wanted to impress everyone, which meant treating guests well. For 2 weeks in August 1936, Berlin became international again. Americans, British, French, and Germans mixed freely before laws and war separated them, before enemies replaced neighbors. The United States sent a small military delegation, perhaps 50 soldiers, to protect athletes, work with German officials, and quietly observe German military organization. Thomas Cooper was one of them. My father was assigned to assist the American delegation," Margaret continued. "He spoke English and took pride in his work. The Americans appreciated him. Sergeant Cooper worked constantly. Security was demanding, crowds everywhere, many locations. My father noticed he barely ate, always grabbing food while moving, so he invited him to dinner. It was German hospitality. You do not let a guest go hungry." Helen translated, and Daniel felt his chest tighten. That sounded exactly like Thomas. Always busy, always forgetting meals. Their mother had scolded him for it his whole life. "Sergeant Cooper came to dinner on August 12, 1936. I remember because it was my 14th birthday. My mother cooked sorbet and Thomas insisted we call him Thomas. He brought flowers for my mother and a small gift for me, an American flag pin. I still have it." She reached into her pocket and produced a small enamel pin, worn but intact. Morrison examined it and handed it to Daniel. Daniel recognized it instantly. The Army issued those pins for exactly that purpose. Small official gifts meant to be personal. One dinner became many dinners. Thomas came 3 or 4 times a week. He and my father became true friends. They talked about politics, ideas, sports. My father had fought in the First World War. He understood soldiers and what service demanded. They disagreed often. My father was proud of Germany's recovery. Thomas distrusted the Nazi Party. They argued respectfully, like brothers do. Morrison interrupted. "Your father was a Nazi Party member." Margaret's expression hardened. "No, never. He loved Germany and wanted stability and work for people, but he never joined the party, never wore the pin. It cost him opportunities, but he refused." Helen translated carefully. "Not all Germans were Nazis. This mattered. The Olympics ended. But Thomas's posting did not. He stayed in Berlin until 1938. He visited our home once or twice a month. He became part of our family. When my grandmother died in 1937, Thomas came to the funeral in uniform and stood with us. Neighbors found it strange, an American soldier at a German funeral, but my father said he is family and family attends funerals. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He could see it clearly. Thomas standing straight in dress uniform at a funeral for someone he barely knew, because it mattered to the people who had taken him in. In 1938, Thomas received orders. He was told he was being sent home back to America. He came to tell us himself. My mother began to cry. My father opened his finest bottle of schnapps, the one he saved only for rare moments. They decided to take a photograph at the Brandenburg Gate. My mother insisted. "So we will remember," she said. Margaret's voice cracked. "We never saw him again. He wrote letters for 1 year. Then in 1939, when war felt unavoidable, the letters stopped. We never knew if he chose to stop writing or if the military forced him to. We only knew he was gone." Morrison leaned forward. "But you kept the photograph." "Yes, through the entire war, through bombings and evacuations. You could have been accused of associating with enemy personnel. Keeping this photograph was dangerous. I did not care. It was all I had left of him." Daniel could not stay quiet anymore. "Mom," he said directly to Margaret, breaking protocol. "Did Thomas ever talk about family in America?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, he spoke about his mother, his father, and his younger brother, Daniel. He said Daniel was intelligent, wanted to become an engineer. Thomas was very proud of him." Daniel's legs failed him. He dropped heavily onto the bench behind him. She knew his name. Thomas had spoken about him. "He showed us photographs," Margaret continued softly, "your family. He carried them everywhere. He said one day he would bring you all to Germany. Let us meet. Make the families officially connected." But the war, Daniel could not finish the sentence. The war made it impossible. "Yes," Morrison called for a pause, sent Margaret back to holding, and kept Daniel in the interrogation room. "Cooper, you are emotionally compromised. I should remove you from this case. Sir, please. I need to hear this. I need to know what happened." Morrison studied him carefully. "Your brother never mentioned this German family." "No, sir. He talked about Germany. Said it was beautiful, said the people were kind. But he never mentioned names. Never said he had been taken in by a family. Why do you think that is?" Daniel had been asking himself the same thing. In 1939, war was coming. If he had told us he had close German friends, almost family, it could have caused trouble. People might have questioned his loyalty. Would they have? "No, sir. Thomas was loyal. He died proving it. But people talk, people assume." Morrison nodded slowly. "I will continue the interrogation. You may stay, but only as an observer. No questions, no interaction." "Understood." "Yes, sir." Margaret was brought back in. She looked drained. Morrison began again. "Fräulein Klein, tell me about 1938 to 1945. What happened to your family after Thomas left? Between 1933 and 1939, around 1,500 Americans lived in Germany. Some were diplomats, some business people, some scholars at German universities, and some military personnel on assignment. Most left before the war began. The United States State Department issued evacuation warnings in late 1938, especially after Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass in November, when Nazi mobs attacked Jewish businesses and synagogues across Germany. But some Americans stayed longer. Some because of work, some because of personal ties, and some because they believed war would never truly come. Soldiers stationed in Germany faced special problems. They formed relationships with German coworkers and families. Some connections were professional. Some were personal. When war started, these connections became dangerous. Soldiers who had German friends were sometimes viewed with suspicion. Had they been influenced? Could they be trusted? Many soldiers stopped talking about it. They buried those friendships and acted as if they never existed. Thomas Cooper appears to have done the same, Margaret continued. After Thomas left, everything changed fast. My father's work with the Olympics had been respected, but by late 1938 the regime tightened control. Anyone with international ties was watched closely. My father was questioned. Why had he spent so much time with Americans? Was he loyal to Germany? He told the truth. He had been doing his job, building relationships that helped Germany's image. But truth no longer mattered. He lost his position and was given small jobs, transport, moving supplies, nothing important, nothing trusted. Then came November 9, 1938. She paused. Our neighborhood had Jewish families, shop owners, neighbors we had known for years. That night we heard glass shattering and saw the crowds. My father went outside and tried to stop them from destroying Goldstein's tailor shop. They beat him. Not badly, but enough to warn him. "Do not interfere," they said. "This is state business." Daniel felt sick. He knew about Kristallnacht. Every American soldier did. It marked the beginning of the end for German Jews. My father came home bleeding. My mother was crying. I was 16 years old and terrified. My father said only one thing: "This is wrong. What we are allowing to happen is wrong." But what could we do? We were nobody, ordinary people with no power. We could only watch. Morrison leaned forward. "Did you help anyone during Kristallnacht or afterward?" Margaret was silent for a long time. "There was a boy," she finally said. "Jacob Goldstein's son, 15 years old. His father had been arrested. His mother was injured. He had nowhere to go. My father brought him to our home. We hid him for 3 days until we could send him to relatives in the countryside. It was very dangerous. If anyone had discovered we were hiding a Jewish boy, we would have been arrested and sent to camps ourselves. But my father said, Thomas would do this. Thomas would help, so we help." Daniel's breath caught. His brother's influence years after leaving Germany was still shaping this family's choices. "We never told anyone," Margaret said. "Not until now. Jacob survived. He immigrated to England in 1939. I received one letter from him before the war thanking us. I do not know what happened to him after that." Morrison made careful notes. This mattered. Proof of Germans who resisted, who helped. These stories were important. "What happened to your family during the war?" Morrison asked. "My father was drafted at 47. The regime needed men. He was sent to France for logistics, moving supplies. He never fired a gun, never fought, but he served. He died in 1943. Allied bombing, his convoy was hit. I was told he did not suffer. I do not know if that is true." She wiped her eyes. "My mother died in 1944 during the Berlin bombings. Our house was destroyed. She was in the shelter when it took a direct hit. I survived. I was working in Munich by then. Auxiliary telephone operations. Someone had to work. Someone had to earn money. There was no choice. When the Americans captured Munich, I surrendered. I gave them my name and unit, expecting to be sent to a camp. But I had the photograph hidden in the lining of my coat. I do not know why. Maybe because it was all I had left of my family. Maybe because I hoped someday I could find Thomas and tell him what happened. Tell him we never forgot him. I never imagined Thomas would be dead. I never imagined I would meet his brother instead." She looked at Daniel. "I am sorry. I am sorry your brother died. I am sorry you never knew about us. But I want you to know Thomas mattered to us. He changed us. He showed us that Americans were not enemies, that nationality does not decide a person's worth, that friendship can cross borders. Without him, we might not have helped Jacob. We might not have resisted, even in small ways. He made us better people. I carried his photograph through the war to remind myself that kindness exists, that connection matters, that even when governments call us enemies, we can still be human." The room was silent. Morrison cleared his throat. "This interrogation is finished. Prisoner Clean will return to general housing. Cooper, you are dismissed." Daniel stood on unsteady legs. As Margaret was led away, he called out, "Mom, Fraulein Clean." She turned. "Thank you," Daniel said, "for remembering him, for keeping the photograph, for telling me." Margaret smiled sadly. He was worth remembering. Daniel could not sleep that night. He lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, trying to connect two versions of his brother. The Thomas he knew, loyal soldier, devoted American, killed fighting Germany, and the Thomas he had just discovered, an adopted member of a German family, close enough that they risked their lives because of him. These were not contradictions. They were the same man, complex, capable of loving people across borders while serving his country. The next morning, Daniel asked to speak with his commanding officer. Captain Hayes listened to everything, examined the photograph, and read Morrison's report. "Cooper, what do you want to happen now?" "Sir, I want to keep the photograph. It is proof of my brother's life and service. It matters. It belongs to the prisoner. By regulation, it should be returned to her. Sir, my brother is in that photograph. That makes it my family's history, too." Hayes thought for a moment. "I will make a compromise. We will copy it. The original goes back to Clean, the copy goes to you. Fair. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. Thank you. One more thing, Hayes said. Clean's story checks out. We verified records. The Olympic Committee lists Kurt Clean in transportation. American delegation notes describe him as helpful. More importantly, we found Thomas's service records. Among his personal effects are letters from Germany, from the Clean family, dated 1936 to 1939. Daniel's heart-raced letters. They are stored in Army archives. No one examined them closely at the time, but they exist. Proof your brother kept contact with this family for years. Can I see them? I will request access. It may take time, but yes, during World War II, soldiers wrote about 2.5 billion letters. These letters, sent and received, were often their most treasured possessions. When soldiers died, their belongings were collected and catalogued. But letters from questionable sources, including people in enemy nations, were sometimes flagged and stored separately. This was done for security, but also for political reasons. The Army did not want grieving families to learn that their sons had kept friendships with those who later became enemies. Thousands of letters like these sit in archives, unread and untouched, holding proof of relationships that do not fit easy stories about the war. Thomas Cooper's letters from the Clean family were catalogued as German correspondence, personal in nature, no security risk, and then they were forgotten until now. 2 weeks later, the letters finally arrived. Daniel sat in the camp library, the quietest place he knew, and opened the file. There were 12 letters, all written in English, from Kurt Clean to Thomas Cooper. He read them in sequence. September 3, 1936. Dear Thomas, Helen and Margaret send their greetings. The city feels strangely hollow now that the Olympics are over and our new friends have gone home. You left a strong impression on this house. My daughter keeps asking when you will visit us again. Please write when you can. Your friend Kurt, December 20, 1936. Dear Thomas, thank you for the Christmas card. Margaret was overjoyed. She hung it on her wall. The photograph of your family is lovely. Your mother looks gentle. Hella says she has the face of someone who raised a good man. We hope one day to meet them. The political situation here grows more difficult. I feel less hopeful than when we last talked. Still, your friendship remains a bright light. Kurt. March 15, 1937. Dear Thomas, I was saddened to hear of your grandmother's death. Please accept our sympathy. Loss is something all people share. It reminds us that nationality matters far less than humanity. We are thinking of you and your family. Kurt. The letters went on month after month, sharing small updates, bits of daily life, questions about Thomas's work, mentions of Margaret's schooling, and references to conversations they once had. They showed clear signs of a real and lasting friendship. Then came November 12, 1938, 2 days after Crystal knocked. Dear Thomas, I do not know if this letter will reach you or if it will be stopped. I must write anyway. Something terrible has happened here. We witnessed violence against our neighbors that fills me with shame as a German. I tried to step in and was beaten for it, but we managed to help one boy, hiding him for 3 days until we could get him to safety. I thought of you when I made this choice. You taught us that doing what is right matters more than doing what is easy. I hope you are well. I hope America remains safe. I hope we meet again, though I fear that may no longer be possible. Your friend always, Kurt. Daniel read that letter 3 times. His brother had received this. He had known the Cleans helped someone during Crystal, had known they risked their lives, and he had never told anyone. By late 1938, having close German friends was dangerous. Talking about them could raise suspicion. Silence was safer. The final letter was dated August 3, 1939, 1 month before Germany invaded Poland. Dear Thomas, this will probably be my last letter for a long while. War is coming. We both know it. Our governments will call us enemies, but you will never be my enemy. You will always be the American soldier who shared our table, who became part of our family, who showed us that borders are illusions made by politicians. If you have children one day, tell them about us. Tell them a German family loved an American soldier. Tell them we were friends even when our nations were not. Tell them humanity survived despite everything. Take care of yourself, Thomas. Take care of your family. We will always carry you in our hearts. Your friend, your brother Kurt. Daniel sat there and cried. Not quietly, not with restraint. He cried the way people do when they discover something beautiful they never knew was there. His brother had been loved across thousands of miles, by people who later became enemies, by people who remembered him long after he was gone. Daniel had never known. Later, Daniel went to Captain Hayes with a request. "Sir, I'd like permission to speak with prisoner Clean again unofficially. Not an interrogation, just a conversation." Hayes looked at him. "Why?" "Because I have my brother's letters from her father, and I believe she deserves to know what they say. Cooper, you know fraternization with prisoners is not allowed." "Sir, this isn't fraternization. I'm sharing information about her father's correspondence. It has personal and historical value." Hayes exhaled slowly. "1 hour supervised, in the recreation area where others can see you. Nothing that looks like special treatment." "Agreed. Yes, sir. Thank you." They met on a Sunday afternoon. The recreation area was busy, prisoners reading, talking, playing cards. Daniel and Margaret sat at a table near a window. A guard stood 20 feet away, watching but not listening. Daniel handed her copies of the letters. "Fräulein Clean, I thought you should see these." Her hands trembled as she took them. She began reading, tears filling her eyes almost at once. "My father's letters," she whispered. "I didn't know these survived. I didn't know Thomas kept them. He kept everything. Your letters, the photograph, all of it was with his belongings when he died." She read carefully, slowly, tracing her father's words. When she reached the Crystal letter, she collapsed into tears. "I was there," she said. "I remember it. I remember Jacob hiding in our attic. I remember how afraid we were. And my father wrote to Thomas about it. He trusted him with something so dangerous." "Your father was brave," Daniel said. "He was also reckless. He could have stayed silent, protected himself, but he didn't. He helped, and he said my brother taught him that." Margaret looked up, tears streaming. "Your brother changed us. Before Thomas, we were ordinary people. We didn't question much. We accepted what we were told. Thomas questioned everything, calmly but firmly. He asked my father why he accepted certain policies, why he stayed quiet. My father said it wasn't his place. Thomas said it is always our place. When we see wrong and stay silent, we become part of it." My father remembered that when Crystal happened, he could have stayed inside and been safe, but he heard Thomas's voice. So he helped, and he was beaten, but he helped. Daniel swallowed hard. "What happened to Jacob? Do you know? I received one letter from him in England in 1939. He thanked us and said he was safe. After that, the war began and I heard nothing more. I don't know if he survived. After the war, I can help you search. The Red Cross traces displaced people. We can try." Margaret smiled faintly. "You would do that for a German prisoner. You saved his life. You hid him when it was dangerous. That matters more than nationality." She touched the letters gently. "May I keep these copies? They are yours. Your father wrote them. You should have them. Thank you." Her voice broke. "This means my father's words lived on, that what he believed, what Thomas taught him, is real and recorded." They sat quietly for a moment, surrounded by guards and prisoners, two people linked by a soldier who died a year earlier. "May I tell you something?" Margaret asked. "Something I've never said aloud, of course. When I was captured and learned I was being sent to America, I was terrified. I thought American soldiers would be cruel. But then I remembered Thomas. I thought if America produces people like him, maybe it will be all right. Maybe Americans can see us as human. That's why I kept the photograph, why I brought it as proof. I never imagined I would meet your brother's family. But I'm glad I did. Now Thomas's story is complete." Daniel nodded. "My family deserves to know about you, about what Thomas meant to your family. Would you write to my mother after the war? Would she want to hear from a German? She will want to hear about her son's other family. Trust me." In the weeks that followed, Daniel learned more of Margaret's life, not through interrogation but through quiet conversations approved by Captain Hayes, who recognized the value of this history. Margaret told him how she protected the photograph through 5 years of war. "When the Berlin bombings began in 1943, I sewed it into the lining of my coat, between the cloth and padding. When I was sent to Munich, I wore that coat everywhere, even in summer. People thought I was strange. When Munich burned, I clung to that coat like my life depended on it. When we evacuated ahead of the Americans, I took only what I could carry. I left everything else. When I surrendered, I feared they would take it, but a soldier glanced at it and said family photo and handed it back. They didn't know it showed an American soldier. I carried it through processing across the ocean into Louisiana, always hidden. Then one day I showed it. I don't know why, maybe I was tired of hiding. I never thought it would reach Thomas's brother. She paused. Do you believe in fate? Daniel thought for a moment. I don't know, but I know this. Of all the camps, you came to this one. Of all the guards, it was me. The odds are impossible. Thomas brought us together, Margaret said. Even in death, he still connects people. During the war, soldiers and civilians carried photographs as their most precious possessions. Without digital records, a photograph was the only way to hold on to loved ones. They were proof of existence, proof of relationships, proof that certain moments were real. Many prisoners destroyed photographs before surrender, especially images that could be dangerous, photos of party events, military gatherings, or ties to former enemies. The fact that Margaret kept Thomas's photograph, even with the danger involved, shows that its emotional meaning was greater than the risk. She was ready to accept punishment for owning it if that meant protecting proof of their friendship. After the war, photographs like this became extremely valuable to historians. They recorded relationships that official documents never mentioned. They revealed that everyday Germans and Americans had once been friends. That bond had existed before war tore everything apart. The photograph from 1936 showing Thomas Cooper with the Klein family at the Brandenburg Gate now sits in military archives, catalogued as evidence of pre-war German-American connections, used by historians studying how ordinary people lived through extraordinary times. But its deepest value is not historical. It is personal. It proves that Thomas mattered, that the Klein family mattered, and that their friendship survived war, separation, death, and long years of silence. In June 1945, Germany formally surrendered. The war in Europe had ended. Daniel wrote a letter to his mother. It took 3 weeks to reach her home in Ohio. When it arrived, she was 63 years old, still mourning her eldest son, still dressed in black, still visiting his grave every Sunday. Daniel's letter changed her life. Dear Mom, I need to tell you something about Thomas. Something I only recently learned. Something that sounds impossible but is true. Thomas had a second family in Germany, a family that loved him, remembered him, and carried his photograph through the entire war. I met the daughter. Her name is Margaret Klein. She is a prisoner here. She told me about Dad, about Kurt Klein, her father, who became Thomas's close friend, who exchanged letters with him for 3 years, and who was influenced so deeply by Thomas that he helped save a Jewish boy during Kristallnacht because Thomas believed this was the right thing to do. Mom, our Thomas changed lives in Germany. He made people better, braver, more willing to resist evil. He mattered to them in ways we never knew. Margaret will be repatriated soon. She wants to write to you to tell you about Thomas's time in Germany and what he meant to their family. Would you be willing to receive a letter from her, from a German woman who loved your son? I know this is complicated. I know she was technically an enemy, but she is also family. Thomas's other family. I think you should know about them. Love, Daniel. His mother's reply arrived 3 weeks later. Dear Daniel, your letter made me cry for 2 days, not from sadness, but from gratitude. You gave me back a part of Thomas I believed was lost forever. Of course I want to hear from this German woman. Of course I want to know about my son's other family. Thomas was always kind, always generous, always able to see the good in people. I am not surprised he helped a German family. I am not surprised they loved him. That was who Thomas was. Please tell Margaret Klein that I would be honored to receive her letter. Tell her that any family of Thomas's is family to me. Tell her that grief crosses borders, that mothers everywhere understand loss, and tell her thank you for remembering my son, for keeping his photograph, for loving him. Your mother. Daniel showed the letter to Margaret, and she broke down in tears. Your mother wants to hear from me, she said in disbelief. After everything, after the war, after knowing I am German, she still wants to know about Thomas. What do I say? How do I explain? Daniel answered simply, tell her the truth. Tell her about dinners in your home, about your father and Thomas becoming friends, about the photograph at the Brandenburg Gate, about carrying his memory through the war. Just tell her, so Margaret wrote. She filled 20 pages in careful English, describing every memory she had of Thomas, every shared meal, every conversation, every moment that mattered. She wrote about her father's friendship with Thomas, her mother's quiet affection, and her own teenage admiration for the kind American soldier who treated her like a younger sister. She wrote about Kristallnacht, about how Thomas's words shaped her father's choice to help, and how Jacob was saved because of lessons learned from an American soldier. She described carrying the photograph through bombings, evacuations, and surrender, because it was all she had left of a family that war had torn apart. She ended her letter with these words: "Mrs. Cooper, I never met you, but Thomas spoke of you often. He said you taught him kindness. He said you raised him to see people as individuals, not labels. He believed you would like my family and understand why he spent so much time with us. He was right. Your letter proved it. Thank you for sharing your son with us. Thank you for allowing us to love him. Thank you for not seeing me as an enemy, but as another person who grieves his loss. He was a good man, the best man I ever knew. The world is poorer without him. With deepest respect and gratitude, Margaret Clean." The letter traveled through Red Cross channels. 3 months later, Margaret was repatriated and sent back to Germany. Before she left, Daniel gave her something special, a professionally made copy of the photograph she had carried through the war, clear and protected. "So you will always have it," Daniel said. "Proof that Thomas existed and that your family's story is real." Margaret held it carefully. "Thank you for believing me," she said, "for understanding, and for remembering my brother." They shook hands, two people connected by a soldier who died on a beach in France, never knowing that his influence would cross borders, survive war, and reach far into the future. Margaret returned to Germany in September 1945. Berlin was in ruins. Her neighborhood was destroyed, her family gone. She found work with the occupation forces, translating and helping displaced people, using the English she had once hidden as a prisoner to help rebuild her country. She wrote to Dorothy Cooper every month, and Dorothy wrote back. Over the years, their letters grew into a large correspondence. Margaret wrote about post-war Germany, the rubble, the hunger, the slow rebuilding, and the shame and guilt that settled over the nation. Dorothy wrote about life in Ohio, her memories of Thomas, her other children, and her grandchildren who would never meet Uncle Thomas. In 1949, Dorothy did something remarkable. She sent Margaret a package. Inside were photographs of Thomas as a child, as a teenager, and in his army uniform, along with documents showing his life before Germany, before the Berlin Olympics, before he met the Clean family, and a letter. "Dear Margaret, you gave me Thomas's later story. Now I give you his earlier one. These photographs show the boy he was and the young man he became. He was always kind, always curious, always wanting to understand people. You knew him at his best, doing what he was meant to do, connecting people and making the world a little better simply by being in it. Keep these. Add them to your photograph from Berlin. Together they tell his full story. Love, Dorothy." Margaret kept those photographs with the original one and created a small album titled Thomas Cooper 1918 to 1944. She never married and never had children, but she became an English teacher and told her students about the American soldier who changed her family, who taught her father to resist evil, and who showed them that nationality does not define worth. In 1952, Daniel visited Germany. He had left the army, become an engineer as he had always planned, and saved money for years to make the journey. He found Margaret in Berlin. She was 30 years old, teaching at a gymnasium and living in a small apartment. They spent a week together, visiting places Thomas had known, the Brandenburg Gate still marked by war, the site where the Clean family's home once stood, now only rubble, and other places Thomas had written about in his letters. Daniel brought a box with him, filled with Thomas's belongings, letters, medals, and personal items that had been kept in storage. "These belong to you as well," he said. "You were his family, and you should have them." Margaret opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a small book, Thomas's personal journal. She opened it and found entries from 1936. August 14, 1936, had dinner with the Clean family again. "Kurt is one of the smartest men I have ever met. Hilla reminds me of Mom. And Margaret is a bright kid who asks endless questions. I will miss them when I leave Berlin, October 3, 1936. Kurt and I talk for hours about politics. He is worried about Germany's direction, distrusts the Nazi Party, but feels powerless. I told him that small acts of resistance matter, that refusing to take part in evil is its own kind of courage. He said he had never thought of it that way. December 25, 1936. Spent Christmas with the Klein family. Hella prepared a wonderful meal. Margaret gave me a scarf she knitted over months. They have become family to me. Strange how people from different countries can connect so deeply and make borders feel unreal. Margaret read every entry, years of Thomas's thoughts, his observations about Germany, his growing love for her family, his fear of rising fascism, and his hope that friendship could outlast politics. The final entry was dated August 1, 1938. I leave tomorrow. The hardest departure I have faced, not because of work but because of people. The Klein family has been my home away from home. Kurt is like a brother. Hella is a second mother. Margaret is the little sister I never had. Leaving them feels like leaving family. War is coming, I can feel it. When it does, our governments will call us enemies and demand we hate each other. I will not. I refuse. I will carry them with me always, and if I survive what is coming, I will find them again. I promise. He died before he could keep that promise, but decades later, his brother kept it for him. The photograph of Thomas Cooper and the Klein family now rests in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., catalogued under pre-war German-American relations personal documentation. But it is more than a historical object. It is proof of something often forgotten about World War II. Before the war, Germans and Americans were friends. They visited each other's countries, attended the same Olympic Games, shared meals, conversations, and hopes for the future. The war forced them to become enemies, even when many never wished to be. Many kept quiet friendships alive, wrote letters they were forbidden to send, and held on to photographs of people they were told they must hate. Margaret Klein choosing to carry Thomas's photograph through 5 long years of war was an act of resistance. It was not loud, not heroic in public, but it was deeply meaningful. She would not allow the war to erase a friendship that mattered to her. She would not accept that a passport or a flag decided a person's value. She refused to forget, and because she refused, this story still exists today. We know that an American soldier touched a German family so deeply that they later protected a Jewish boy during Kristallnacht. We know that friendship can move past borders, uniforms, and fear. We know that even in the darkest moments, humanity does not disappear. The photograph shows 4 people smiling at the Brandenburg Gate. It is summer 1936, before the war, before loss, before everything fell apart. It is a small moment of hope captured in silver and paper. That single photograph survived bombings, forced evacuations, surrender, and even a journey across the ocean. It later reunited a prisoner and a guard who discovered they were connected like family. Now, 89 years later, the image reminds us that the enemy is never only the enemy. They are people with families, with friendships, with memories, with photographs they carry through hell. It reminds us that connection matters more than survival alone. That is the lesson this photograph gives us. That is what Margaret Klein's story confirms. That is what Thomas Cooper's life showed through action. The borders that divide us are illusions created by fear. The hatred that separates us is learned over time, but the humanity that ties us together is real. It endures, it is permanent, and in the end, it is what survives.